Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 222 based on novel. So let's start. Mua, let me take a look at your eye. Granny Sai stared at his eyes for a while, and she didn't see Fu Riluo in this eye. She used a mirror to reflect, but there was still no trace of Fu Riluo in these eyes. Only then was she at ease and she instructed, "You can use this eye, but don't use your magic power. Granny will handle any danger we meet. After we meet Saint Woodcutter, you will still have to use this golden willow leaf to cover it up properly." Qin Mu nodded his head and kept the golden willow leaf. It was still his first time using the third eye in the heart of his brows to observe the world. He looked around curiously, and the world as seen by this eye was somewhat different from the things he saw with his two normal eyes. When his two normal eyes looked at divine arts practitioners, they would see the outer appearance, while in the vision of his third eye, everything became strange. When he looked at Granny Sai, other than seeing Granny Sai's outer appearance, he could even clearly see Granny Sai's divine treasures, and even Granny Sai's primordial spirit. The most terrifying thing was when Qin Mu saw Granny Sai's primordial spirit, he actually felt that it was delicious. There was a pang of hunger making him want to eat her primordial spirit very much. He didn't know where this feeling was coming from, but he felt his stomach was rumbling with hunger, having a terrifying desire to just grab Granny Sai's primordial spirit out from her body to swallow. The starvation was real, and this made him have an urge to swallow everything. When they were in the ruins of Without Embroiling City, he opened his third eye for the first time. An earth count appeared to smack his jade pendant into his third eye. Mute, blind, and the rest then forged the golden willow leaf to seal this eye, therefore he didn't feel any difference. Now after opening his third eye, only then did he notice the peculiarity. Is it the problem of this eye, or is it the problem of Lufu heaven? Qin Mu suppressed his urge to swallow Granny Sai's primordial spirit, and he fell in deep thoughts. It shouldn't be the problem of Lufu heaven. Lufu heaven is a world of the devils. Even if there's a problem, it should only be the problem of the devil Qi. The devil Qi wouldn't make me feel hungry, so this problem still lies in this eye. Strange, why would I feel hunger when this eye opens? He was puzzled and could only put this question aside. He followed Granny Sai to head forward to the closest sacrificial altar. Saint Woodcutter and the 24 gods had constructed numerous tall pyramid sacrificial altars used to sacrifice Supreme Emperor Heaven, forcing Fu Riluo to stop the war. To prevent the sacrificial altars from being destroyed, Saint Woodcutter would definitely protect these sacrificial altars, and before these altars are destroyed, Fu Riluo and the rest would also not make a move and clash with Supreme Emperor Heaven. Heading to the sacrificial altars to find Saint Woodcutter was the best choice of action. Qin Mu looked around, and the Lufu heaven he saw was basically the same as the Lufu heaven Fu Riluo showed him. It was even more treacherous. Huge planets moved above Lufu heaven, and the magnetic force of the planets was disrupting with Lufu heaven's magnetic force, causing the ground to quake violently. The magnitude to the earthquake was so terrifying that it caused volcanoes to erupt. The speed of the storm even surpassed the speed of the storm by dozens of times. The gales were like blades and seemed to be spirit weapons with the strongest power. Everywhere they blew past, and even volcanoes that just rose were turned into powder under the sharp gusts. The most terrifying thing was still the ocean. Waves that reached the sky was moving at terrifyingly high speed, and the speed of the waves has also surpassed the speed of sound, destroying everything in its path. Earthquakes, gales, waves, volcanoes, this was earth, water, wind, and fire. These elements had made Lufu heaven unsuitable for any life forms to live on it. This place was that scary. As a result, the space had become unstable too. The shattered space formed a long and narrow crack between heaven and earth. Like mirrors without any thickness, it reflected sights that were either far or near. These space cracks were either so long that one couldn't see the end of them, or they were very short, being only 2 to 3 feet. Because there was no thickness, it was very difficult to notice, therefore every step had to be very careful. If one was to pass through a crack in space by accident, they would most likely be split cleanly into 2 halves. The space was too sharp, and one would probably realize they were already dead after they were sliced. Qin Mu and Granny Sai were defending against the huge waves that were rushing over, and they saw a huge wave that was over 10,000 feet being sliced apart by an astonishing space crack, splitting the wave into 2 halves. Stars flashed in front and behind Granny Sai and formed great overarching heavenly stars force field, and she borrowed the force field to sense the dangers in her surroundings. At the same time, the force field could defend against the disaster of Lufu heaven. Granny Sai was already in existence, who had entered God realm, and even though Lufu heaven was dangerous, it still wasn't a threat to her life. Qin Mu looked around and he looked at this place that was as terrifying as hell. There were countless souls floating around, and those were souls of Lufu heaven's devils that had died. This hugely raised his appetite. He hurriedly controlled his desire of swallowing those souls, and he felt fear. What monster has this eye turned me into? Right at this moment, they suddenly saw a huge corpse of a devil god prone in the center of a storm, on the barren plains in front of them. No matter how strong the storm was, it was unable to move the corpse at all. They came to the front, and even when the corpse was prone on the ground, it was still over 100 yards tall. This corpse grew wings, which had also turned into bones, and his 4 hooves were like huge bull hooves, however, they were shiny golden. Not only that, Qin Mu even saw glowing divine treasures in the body of this devil god. There were sun, moon, stars, and even land inside. The divine treasures were already destroyed and the land was submerged in water. Qin Mu and Granny Sai entered from a hole in the divine treasure, and they saw the water had already submerged the entire land in the divine treasures. Even the sun, moon, and stars in the sky were broken here and there. What was even stranger was that there were even houses in that land, and numerous houses were already submerged under the water. This was once a refugee camp of the devil race. Looks like it was only destroyed several hundred years ago. Granny Sai was astonished, and she pondered. Could it be that after the disaster of Lufu heaven, some devil gods were willing to sacrifice their corporeal body for the devil life forms to live in their own divine treasures? Qin Mu used his 3rd eye to look around, and he saw in a place far away, above the broken galaxy, there was a devil god celestial palace that was already dilapidated. In the divine treasure of this devil god, a flying bridge was connected to the devil celestial palace. He could faintly see that there was a soul in the devil celestial palace, which was very faint. It stood there alone and seemed to be in sorrow. He had an urge of wanting to fly over and eat this sorrowful soul, but his inner heart could no longer feel hunger. Instead, his heart was filled with respect. This devil god only had his soul left. He had let out his divine treasures for his clansmen to reside in, to protect the lives of his clansmen, yet his corporeal body also couldn't defend against the natural disasters. His corporeal body died. His clansmen might have lived in his divine treasure for a long time, but in the end, his divine treasures were also broken through by the natural disasters. He had exhausted his primordial spirit, and only his soul wasn't wiped out. However, his clansmen have still died. His soul must have been standing here for a few hundred years already. Qin Mu looked around, and this 3rd eye could see numerous wandering souls. Those were the devil commoners that had died in the divine treasures of this god. The messenger of death didn't come here, and Qin Mu looked towards the life and death divine treasure of this devil god. The life and death divine treasure had already been destroyed by this devil god, and that was probably the reason why the souls of these devil commoners were trapped here. Every race has inspiring and tragic figures. Qin Mu closed the eye on the heart of his brows. He felt disgusted at his thoughts of wanting to eat these souls. This was definitely not his ideas. It was definitely not his subconsciousness. He couldn't have such evil subconsciousness. No matter what is this thing that's affecting my thoughts, you disgust me. Qin Mu opened his eye and turned around. Yudu language came from his mouth, and a gate of heaven influence rose behind him. The gate opened wide, and this time, he didn't execute Soul Guide, he changed the divine art instead. He wanted to send these spirits of the devil race to Yudu. In the divine treasures of the devil god, waves of cold wind blew and went into gate of heaven influence, flying into the darkness. On the other side of gate of heaven influence, numerous small boats sailed over and fetched the spirits. Not long later, the cold wind stopped and a lantern shone its light over onto Qin Mu's face. It is you. You actually didn't commit any trouble. In the gate, the voice of Elder Messenger of Death traveled over and he sounded astonished. Qin Mu waved his hand and closed gate of heaven influence. Granny, let us go. Granny Sai nodded her head gently and looked at him. She said with an expression of gratification, Mua has really grown up. Just as they were about to leave, a feeble voice suddenly came from a place far away. Much thanks. Qin Mu heard this voice and he was slightly stunned. He turned his head back and saw that the soul of that devil god was currently crumbling and dispersing in the devil celestial palace. The majestic palace was also crumbling rapidly and stars were being wiped out one after another. Mua, there's no need to look anymore, his soul has already dispersed. Granny Sai held his hand and brought him out of the divine treasures quickly. The wish of this devil god wasn't fulfilled, so his soul didn't disperse, otherwise, his soul would have long turned into dust. When his soul disperses, his divine treasures will also crumble. Just as they rushed out, a heart-palpitating shockwave came from behind and the divine treasures were obliterated in the rumbles. Violent explosions swept out in all directions. Granny Sai hurriedly brought Qin Mu to escape far away, and the shockwave from the explosions came assaulting over, throwing them both high up. Granny Sai tried her best to spread open great overarching heavenly stars force field to protect Qin Mu, and at this moment, a beam of black light flew out from the destruction, and broke through great overarching heavenly stars force field, moving like a flood dragon. Mua assisted you, and send the souls of your people to Yudu, yet you still dare to harm him. Granny Sai was furious and wanted to make a move, when that beam of black light circled around to the back of Qin Mu's head and transformed into a black glow. In the center of the black glow were lines of intense red light, which formed a red circle, as though it was a blood-colored devil moon. Qin Mu turned his head back, but he couldn't see this devil moon. He hurriedly took out a mirror to reflect the back of his head, and he saw the devil moon slowly swirling behind him. In the black glow were countless devil writings that were continuously changing and flowing. Granny Sai's anger turned into joy, and she said with a smile, "At least you still have a conscience." Mua, this devil moon is transformed from the remaining energy in that devil god's divine treasures. He had used it to repay you. This thing is not bad. It can help you increase the cultivation of your devil path. Qin Mu also immediately felt the appearance of this devil moon, and his devil vitality was also increasing rapidly. It might be assumed that not much longer, he would be able to break through 7-star divine treasure in one go. Granny, that devil god's soul should be able to see that I'm a human, why did he still help me? Qin Mu was puzzled and he asked. Granny Sai walked towards the sacrificial altars in the distance and she said, "You are clearly a human, so why did you help the spirits of those devils, sending them to Yudu?" Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Granny Sai said with a smile, "You have the heart of a newborn child, and he also knows how to repay the kindness. There are also heroes in the devil race. There are also people worthy of respect." Qin Mu's face that was covered with the white ribbon was stunned for a moment. After a moment, his face broke into a radiant smile, and he caught up to Granny Sai with quick steps. The third eye on the heart of his brows looked at Granny Sai. He could see Granny Sai's primordial spirit, yet this time, he no longer had the desire to eat Granny Sai's primordial spirit. His heart was in peace. Maybe there were still faces as beautiful as Granny Sai in this world, but under every beautiful face, not everyone would have a soul as beautiful and kind as Granny Sai. In fact, Qin Mu was truly grateful that it was Granny Sai that had picked him up and raised him up painstakingly. His kindness was inherited from none other than Granny Sai. Even though she was known as Heavenly Devil Cult Saintess, and carried the name of the evil woman who killed her own husband, she was actually the kindest people in Disabled Elderly Village. Every one person in Disabled Elder Village had their own evil, and they hid from the world for all sorts of reasons, entering Great Ruins. Granny Sai was the only one that got forced into Great Ruins by herself. She felt that she was a femme fatale, because of her beauty. That was why she rather dressed up as an old woman, and not see the people of the world fight over one another after seeing her beauty. Other people wanted to make themselves prettier, and treated their beauty as a weapon. On the other hand, she was trying her best to make herself uglier. I can already control the desire brought by this eye. Qin Mu was gratified and examined the surroundings. Even though he could see numerous broken souls of the devil race, he could already accept what he saw and no longer had the thoughts of wanting to absorb them. Granny Sai turned her head back and said sweetly, "Mua, your aura seems to have changed." Something had happened. Something very marvelous. Qin Mu was in great mood and he said with a smile, "Something that makes me happy." Granny asked curiously, "What's the marvelous thing? Tell me about it." Qin Mu said loudly, "I feel Granny is the prettiest woman in the world. You are also the kindest woman in the world." Granny Sai shook her head, and the pearl earrings dangling from her ears swayed. "How can a demoness from Heavenly Devil Cult be the kindest person? I'm not." "Mua, you are then the kindest person." Qin Mu laughed and said, "The cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult is also no kind soul." Granny's feeling also somehow become much better, and the two of them talked and laughed as they head towards the closest sacrificial altar. Suddenly, Qin Mu and Granny Sai stopped at the same time and looked over there. Far away, the sacrificial altar was as tall as a mountain, and there were steps on all four sides. The steps were like a pathway to heaven, leading up into the clouds. The sacrificial altar was so tall that it was like a magnificent mountain standing upright. On the steps, there were countless runes that flickered on and off. These were runes used to sacrifice Lufu heaven. Saint Woodcutter constructed this sacrificial altar using the method of blood sacrifice from the devil race, but he wanted to sacrifice the entire world, so the effect of one sacrificial altar wasn't enough. He required numerous sacrificial altars, and only then would he be able to tear Lufu heaven into pieces, transforming it into pure energy. This action definitely has an unknown drawback, so Saint Woodcutter didn't dare to use it easily as well. It was just that Supreme Emperor Heaven really has no chances of victory, so he had no choice but to do this. The reason why Supreme Emperor Heaven has no chances of victory wasn't because the devil race was too powerful. It was because Supreme Emperor Heaven had to be destroyed, and only then was the devil race able to enter eternal peace. The devil race wasn't strong. What was strong was the power to destroy Supreme Emperor Heaven. At this moment, on the top of the sacrificial altar, a god stood there wielding a battle axe. With chi and blood rushed into the sky. Under the sacrificial altar, tens of thousands of devil soldiers were like a bunch of insects swarming up the peak and attacking towards the top of the sacrificial altar. That god stood on the peak of the sacrificial altar and waved his battle axe. Snow-bright lights slashed down from the peak, and as they swept through, countless limbs flew into the air. One man and one battle axe blocked down tens of thousands of devil soldiers, turning their blood into rivers and dyeing the sacrificial altar red. The blood flowed down step by step. WHRNG, WHRNG, WHRNG. Sound of the battle axe swing rang out wave after waves. Corpses had already filled up the steps, but the other devils were still not afraid of death. They continued to rush forward like a flood and climbed up the top of the sacrificial altar frantically, wanting to kill that god. Granny sigh, these devils are only ordinary divine arts practitioners. They are definitely not a match for this god. Qin Mu saw this in eyes and his heart was puzzled. Why do they want to give up their lives just like that? Granny Sai was also slightly puzzled. These devils were indeed sending themselves to death. Even if there were strong practitioners of divine bridge realm among them, they were far from being a match for that god. That god was one of the 24 honored gods that Saint Woodcutter has invited, and he had powerful abilities. Even if he was inferior to Saint Woodcutter, he was still pretty remarkable among the gods. Even if more devils poured forward, he still couldn't be eliminated. Fu Riluo wouldn't be so dumb. Granny Sai pondered and said, in that case, what's the aim of these devils rushing forward to their death? These devils won't waste much of this god's energy. Could a devil god be hiding among these devils? Qin Mu focused his gaze, and his third eye could see the divine treasures of everyone very clearly. He didn't discover any devil gods hiding among them. This is a blood sacrifice. He suddenly came to a realization and cried out, Fu Riluo is planning on using a blood sacrifice in exchange for the descent of a terrifying being. There's definitely a devil god nearby that's preparing to carry out the sacrificial rite. Just as he said until here, the blood on the sacrificial altar suddenly stopped flowing. All of the corpses and bodies of living devils froze and they involuntarily floated into the air. Afterward, no matter if they were corpses or living bodies, their bodies all disintegrated in an instant and their flesh, blood, bones and even primordial spirits were vibrated into the smallest atom, transforming into a blood river that swirled around that sacrificial altar and that god. That god on the peak of the sacrificial altar swung his battle axe and exploded with terrifying divine might. The moves of the battle axe were exquisite, and the spell divine art he executed were also extremely astonishing, yet he couldn't break this sacrificial rite. Qin Mu immediately looked around the surroundings and searched places that are even further, trying to find that devil god that was sacrificing his own clansmen. That devil god that was hosting this blood sacrifice needed to be here personally, so he was definitely nearby. Granny Sai had also came to a realization and began to look around. She has already constructed her human body network of vital qi circulation, and among them included Blind's divine eyes. Her pupil divine arts were exactly the same as Blind's 9 heavens eyes awakening skill, but it wasn't as exquisite as Blind. Even so, with her cultivation on the god realm executing the divine eyes, her eyesight was also extremely terrifying. Yet after searching around, she still couldn't find where the devil god that was hosting the sacrificial rite was hiding. If I knew, I would have called Blind along. Granny Sai was a little anxious. Yet at this moment, Qin Mu, who was beside her, gave a low cry, Granny, I found him. Granny Sai was slightly stunned. She didn't have the time to think and hurriedly asked, where is he? Qin Mu pointed his finger up into the sky above the sacrificial altar, and Granny Sai hurriedly took a look. She could only see the blood river in the sky swirling furiously in a circle, but she still couldn't see where that devil god was at exactly. This eye of Mua is indeed extraordinary. To actually be able to find that devil god. She was slightly bewildered. This eye, what's its origin? Why does even Earth Count want to seal it? Even though Qin Mu could only open the eye on the heart of his brows, but his eyesight was extremely strange. He could see things that other divine eyes couldn't, and that devil god's method of hiding was extremely marvelous. It was evident that he had a kind of extremely strange concealment divine art. He hid inside a space crack above the sacrificial altar and cast his spell. He sometimes upside down, sometimes having messy and loose hair, disorderly footsteps, and seemed to be crazy and wild. Qin Mu said solemnly, "Granny, look at the direction where my vital chi thread is extending to. I will show you the precise location with my vital chi thread. You must kill him." Granny Sai shouted, "You are not allowed to use Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. You can only use your vital chi thread to point out the direction. Pass me great educational heavenly devil scriptures." Qin Mu's heart moved slightly and a ball of thread flew out. Next, his vital chi transformed into thread, and a thread stretched out quickly into the sky above the sacrificial altar. This vital chi thread pointed straight at the place where the devil god that was casting the spell was hiding. At the same time, Granny Sai controlled the scriptures of great educational heavenly devil scriptures, and countless runes danced in the sky like a thread. The thread transformed by the scriptures and stuck closely to Qin Mu's vital chi thread, extending rapidly. Granny Sai's magic power poured into the writings in great educational heavenly devil scriptures, and this was imparted by Founding Master of Heavenly Saint Cult. Founding Master refined the scriptures into treasure, and as long as the scriptures don't open up, it was a small and delicate ball of thread. However, if it was spread open and expanded with vital chi, that would be countless writings. Not only that, the scriptures could be used as spirit weapons and it possessed extremely strong power. Granny Sai once used the scriptures to fight with numerous strong practitioners in Border Dragon City, and when Qin Mu entered the darkness of great ruins with village chief for the first time, the scriptures were also one of the treasures he had brought along with him to protect him. It was just that afterward, Qin Mu had his own spirit weapon, so he rarely used great educational heavenly devil scriptures anymore. The scripture was already no longer convenient for him to use. Yet to Granny Sai, the scriptures was the best spirit weapon for her, and it was the most compatible with her technique and nature. She could even use great educational heavenly devil scriptures to execute transformations that only divine art could execute. It was only because Qin Mu was the heavenly devil cult master, so it was natural for great educational heavenly devil scriptures to be kept by Qin Mu, thus she didn't ask for it from Qin Mu. This vital chi thread of Qin Mu extended 50 miles, and it was about to reach the hiding spot of that devil god. However, the durability of his vital chi thread had reached its limit. If he could execute Overlord Body, he could extend his vital chi 6 times more than now, but if he didn't execute his technique, his vital chi could only extend 50 miles. Mua, you can never execute your technique. With your vital chi thread confirming the direction, I will be able to kill him. Granny Sai instructed once again, and a divine bridge stretched across the sky behind her. Her primordial spirit appeared and crossed the bridge, reaching the celestial palaces on the end of the divine bridge. Granny Sai shouted, and there was actually divine might bursting forth from her body. Outside the southern heavenly gate, light shone into the 9 heavens, and the writings of great educational heavenly devil scripture was like the finest spirit snake slithering into the hiding spot of that devil god. That devil god was in the most crucial part of the spell. Light instantly rushed into the sky and a silver line pierced right into the heart of his brows. That devil god was astonished and he hurriedly grabbed towards the heart of his brows, pinching onto a thread. He was slightly stunned. What is this? Beside Qin Mu, Granny Sai's beautiful hair fluttered, and she was like a butterfly with her clothes dancing in the wind. Divine art after divine art came bombarding over. That devil god had a huge change in expression, and he was about to pull this thread out from his body when great educational heavenly devil scriptures suddenly expanded, transforming into hundreds of divine arts, which exploded. Bang 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 bang. Countless vibrations came out from that space crack, and next, the blood of the devil god poured out from that space crack. It was like a wound in the sky, which had blood pouring out like a waterfall. Granny Sai let out a sigh of relief, and kept great educational heavenly devil scriptures. She raised her head and saw that the blood sacrifice hasn't ended. Even though that devil god was dead, the blood sacrifice was already completed. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures was still a ball of thread, and Granny Sai wanted to hand the ball of thread over to Qin Mu, who shook his head. Granny, keep the scriptures first. There are still many dangers in Lufu heaven, it's useless for it to be with me. Granny Sai took out a small bamboo basket, and it was a small flower basket that had a circular top and squarish bottom. There were also some cloth strips and things like scissors and silver needles. They should be her spirit weapons. The two of them looked at the swirling blood river in the sky, and they saw that blood river trapping that god wielding that battle axe in the center. The goal of this sacrifice didn't merely seem to be summoning a god. The blood river didn't transform into the blood light, which summons the gods, and instead, lumps of blood would break off and transform into different kinds of marvelous markings. Those runes were very profound, and they should be the sacrificial method of the devil race. Sacrificial rites were originally from the devil race, and Qin Mu had learned some methods before. Ghost transferring god dispatching runes command was a kind of sacrificial method that was from Jiutian Devil King. Jiutian Devil King had spread this sacrificial method to eternal peace, with the aim of summoning himself over to invade eternal peace. After meeting Qin Mu, he dropped that thought. The devil race also has numerous heavens. Jiutian and Lufu heaven were one part of the devil race's heavens, and these two worlds have sunk into destruction. They were both searching for ways to extend the lives and numbers of their people. In fact, most of the sacrificial methods were from the devil race. The devil race had created numerous sacrificial methods, and built their own unique civilization, which was very different from eternal peace and Supreme Emperor Heaven. The human race has also learned some sacrificial methods from the devil race, and for example, numerous sacrificial methods in great educational heavenly devil scriptures were also cultivation techniques of the devil path. The human race not only learned the sacrificial methods, and also numerous other devil techniques. For example, Roland's Golden Palace's shaman spells was from shaman god Kuei, and shaman god Kuei was a devil god that was dispatched from the celestial heavens to Yudu. Something is not right. Granny Sai examined the blood river around the sacrificial altar, and more of those blood-colored runes appeared. Meanwhile, under the encirclement of the blood river, that god that had come from great ruins seemed to have been trapped. He tried to crash out of this sacrificial rites repeatedly, but he could never break out of it. He even tried to rush out of the sacrificial altar, but he couldn't rush out either. The abilities of that devil god that was hosting the sacrificial rites weren't strong, otherwise, he wouldn't have died under Granny Sai's surprise attack. His abilities should be far inferior to the battle axe god, but his sacrificial method was profound. Even when he had died in Granny Sai's hands, the blood sacrifice could still trap the battle axe god in the center and made him unable to escape. He is planning to sacrifice this battle axe god together. Granny Sai shuddered and she muttered, he has treated the battle axe god as a sacrificial offering as well, offering him to some ancient being along with the blood river, summoning that being to descend. Qin Mu didn't research much about sacrifice, and his attainments were actually inferior to Granny Sai. Even so, he could see that the battle axe god was in a bad position. This battle axe god wore armor, and there were already droplets of blood slowly flowing out. It floated into the air and fused with the blood river. Not only that, the battle axe in his hands and the armor in his body were all starting to lose the essence. That devil god's sacrificial method was simply too powerful. The god that wielded the battle axe was already much weaker than before, and he had already become frail. The chi and blood he lost, the harder it would be for him to defend against this sacrificial rite. The devil god that Granny had killed just now was probably one of the top-notch sacrificial rite expert. You killed an extremely important devil god. Qin Mu looked at that god that wielded his battle axe and he cried out. Granny Sai said sorrowfully, but I can't save that god on the altar. We will only send ourselves to death if we rushed into the sacrificial altar. We can't stop this sacrifice, nor can we stop the descent of this ancient existence. On the sacrificial altar, that battle-axe god charged left and right, yet he was only exhausting himself even more. Finally, he gave up on fighting back and stood at the peak of the sacrificial altar, raising his head up the sky to look at something. This was the end of a god's road, and he was about to be broken down as a sacrificial offering, becoming the fertilizer for another ancient being. I should have died long ago. This video will end here.